In this video, I'll be walking you through step by step how to plan the perfect trip to Europe for Christmas markets, with insider knowledge to help you eliminate overwhelm and have the best, most magical trip ever. And of course, I wore my candy cane dress for the occasion. Now, in case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com. And this channel is all about practical travel tips from someone who's been there, done that. So be sure to like and subscribe for more travel videos just like this one. And if you stick until the end, I'll even link you to a free workbook that walks you through all these different steps with some fun graphics and things like that. I will say this guide has been created with 10 years of Christmas market experience, so I hope you find it helpful. Now let's jump right into it with step 1, which is deciding how long to go for. Of course, this is a very personal decision and is going to depend on a lot of different factors, including your budget, your vacation days, how many destinations you want to cover, and also any maximum stay restrictions with your passport. I will say though, generally speaking, if you're coming from overseas, I would recommend minimum 10 days just to make sure you have enough time to get over the jet lag and also make it worth it. If you have less than 10 days to play with, that is absolutely fine, but I would definitely recommend cutting down on the number of destinations that you cover in that time because you want to be able to actually enjoy it. So for this, feel free to use that free page in your workbook to kind of figure things out. Now let's move on to step 2, which is deciding where you're going and when. And I know this is a tough one. There are tons of gorgeous Christmas markets all around Europe, and deciding which ones to actually go to is very overwhelming and difficult. I will say I have loads of videos on my channel already recapping my favorite Christmas markets in different countries, and also one video that actually summarizes my top recommended Christmas market itineraries. But generally speaking, I would say if this is your first trip to Europe for Christmas markets and you want the most traditional experience, the most magical possible experience, then I would definitely stick with Germany and Austria and maybe some of their neighboring countries. Granted, there are amazing Christmas market destinations all across the continent, but really if you're looking for the best ones, the most traditional ones, this sort of area is where you want to go. And what I would really recommend is choosing a handful of cities to use as a base for minimum 3 nights each, and then if you feel like you've not had enough in the cities, then you can do day trips out to other destinations close by. Because honestly, the reason I recommend Germany and Austria is because practically every city, every town, every village has their own Christmas market. So even if you choose a really small section of the map, you can visit dozens of markets in that time, so do not stress. The reason I really recommend not moving around bases too much is because if you have to unpack every day, that's just not the magical festive vibe that we're looking for. And this part of Europe is really so well connected with public transport that you don't need to worry too much about being able to get to other places because there will be trains or buses that can bring you to many other destinations, even if you get bored. So really 3 nights minimum, I would say, in each base, just to make your life as easy as possible. As a bonus, if you force yourself to stay in a smaller area, that really encourages you to seek out lesser known hidden gems. So I personally find sometimes my favorite Christmas markets are actually the really small ones, not the ones that are in the big cities, but the ones that are in the smaller villages around. So if you force yourself to stick to one small area, then you're gonna do the research and figure out which small ones you can visit. And I promise you, you're gonna have a way better experience that way. My ideal itinerary would definitely include both big city markets and also smaller, cozier village ones. And as I said before, a lot of people end up preferring the smaller ones, so definitely make sure you carve in some time for those. Now, if you're really on the fence about which Christmas markets to visit, I know this is going to sound so basic, but the best thing I can recommend you do is just take out a map and start researching and starring the different options. You can find one in my free workbook, and basically what I recommend you do here is just go on a research binge. So hop on your favorite search engine, skim through the top blogs and listicles to get a sense of what the top Christmas markets are in the countries that you're visiting. Then hop on social media. TikTok personally for me is my favorite to do research on because the search capabilities are just way better than Instagram and Facebook. But just hop on social media, look up different Christmas markets. This is some very high level research, so you have my permission to dream big. Then look up local blogs and sites to find lesser known Christmas markets. Tourism board websites are a really good resource for this because a lot of the time they're going to be promoting some of the smaller markets that you'll never hear about on the bigger website. So just know that pretty much every small town, as I said, is going to have a Christmas market at some point if you're visiting Germany or Austria. So look not just at the national tourism board, but at the individual state tourism boards, as local as you can get, and you're going to be able to find some of those really small markets that I promise are very, very cute. Then all you need to do is any one that you like the look of, start on your map, and at the end of your research binge, you can look at the map and see where the different clusters of stars are. Then based on that, you can kind of determine, okay, I have tons of Christmas markets starred in this region, maybe this is where we should dedicate our time. Now, if you are still stuck, it might actually make sense here to skip over to step 4, which is researching flights. Because if you can't choose, then maybe let prices decide for you, just because depending on where you're coming from, the flight prices might actually have considerable sway over where you end up going. So feel free to skip over to step 4 and start exploring flights. If I were to personally recommend a few different bases though, my personal favorites would be Cologne, Munich, Vienna, and if you're open to visiting France, then Strasbourg as well. Each of these cities have plenty of great Christmas markets on their own, so you could easily just explore them for a few days, but also they're very well connected by public transport to tons of other smaller markets. So that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for good bases that have lots of Christmas markets of their own and also good transport to others. Now, in terms of when to go, unfortunately, with Christmas markets in Europe, all of them have separate opening dates. And that is kind of annoying, but there is considerable overlap, so you don't need to worry too much. Generally speaking, the more traditional markets are going to anchor their dates around the weekends of Advent, which do vary every year, so be sure to just research what it is for your year that you're planning for. But some Christmas markets do open as early as mid-November, and some of them do stay open after Christmas as well these days because, let's be honest, they're good money makers. So you will find quite a broad range of dates, but overall the most important thing is you make sure you triple check any dates that you find online. And this is because, as I said before, dates vary from market to market. They also change every year because the weekends of Advent change. So sometimes you're going to come across third-party websites that haven't really bothered to update the dates, they just change the year. So make sure you're triple checking before you book anything, and also make sure you're getting your information from official sources, or at least websites that link to official sources. So places like tourism boards, or even better, the official event website, because that's going to give you the most accurate information possible. Generally speaking, the earlier in the season you go, the less busy it's going to be. I would also suggest planning your visits for midweek rather than over the weekend, because that's of course when all the locals go to markets as well, and also when people from within Europe go on weekend trips. So it can get super busy, and it's just not as fun when you're not able to move. Although do be aware that some smaller markets actually only open on weekends. So again, when you're looking at the dates, make sure you're not just looking at the broad range, make sure to actually read the dates properly, because sometimes they'll specify an entire range of dates, when in reality they're only open on weekends or closed on certain dates. I would also avoid planning your trip for close to Christmas Eve, just because in many countries, Christmas Eve is kind of the big celebration day. So you'll find most major markets will actually close on Christmas Eve. As I mentioned before, some markets do choose to open after Christmas as well, into the first week of January. But most of the time, the vibes just aren't the same. Not all the vendors will be there after Christmas, and it's just better, I think, to go before Christmas Eve, especially in Germany and Austria, because most markets will be closed by Christmas Eve. Now, the next step after deciding where you're going to be going and for how long is figuring out visas and documents that you might need. Of course, this is 100% going to depend on what passport you have, so I can't really provide specific advice on this. But one thing that I will note is that if you are part of one of the 50+ countries that have a visa exemption for the Schengen area, which refers to this group of countries in Europe, then you do not need to apply for a visa in advance of your arrival. Do be aware though that if you are visiting from mid-2025 onwards, you will probably be required to apply for something known as an ETIAS. This isn't a visa, this is just a digital travel authorization that takes only a few minutes to apply for, and it only costs a few euros. So it's not as intensive as a visa application, but do note that once they roll this out, you are going to need to apply for it. Needless to say, the best possible resource in regards to which visas or documents you might need for visiting Europe is going to be your official government website. Do not just go to those third-party visa sites. Most of the time they are trying to sell you a visa service, so stick to official government websites to figure out what visas you might need. All right, now it's time to move on to the next step, which is booking your flights to Europe. I do have a full video on this, but very briefly, this is my process. So first I hop on Google Flights. Then I enter my departure airport and destination. If I don't have a specific destination in mind, let's say I want to go to Germany, but I'm not sure where, then you can actually just type in Germany, or if you want to be even broader, you can just type in Europe. Plus, if you have several potential airports you can depart from, you can actually enter all of those at once and search all those options at the same time if you just type in the different airport codes. Then I'll enter the specific dates if I have them, or a rough estimate. If I'm flexible, then I'll hit the Explore button. Once you're on the map view, then you can see your different options, but you can also click on the dates, then go to that flexible dates tab and choose your parameters, like a 1-week trip in December, for instance. Then you can hit done and you can look for the best deals. From there, just scroll your list of options, and if you see one you like, click See Flights, and from there you can also click on this date grid here that shows you if it's possibly cheaper to fly out on other dates around those dates that you specified. So this is a great way to suss out the best deal. Then just repeat this process until you find flights that you like. After you choose your flight, I would generally advise that you book directly with the airline rather than any third parties, even if they give you a slight discount. And that's just because with third parties, they're not scams. You will actually get a ticket for the plane, but generally speaking, if anything goes wrong and you need customer service or support, booking directly with the airline is going to give you the best possible customer support. So I always advise that, even if you have to pay a little bit extra for it. Now, after you figure out which airports you're flying into, it's time to properly build your itinerary. Again, as I said before, my personal recommendation is picking a handful of bases and staying in each one for minimum 3 nights. Then you can just do day trips out to other markets, and that'll really minimize how much you need to unpack and move. Now, I usually don't mind a fast-paced trip, but to be honest with you, when it's a Christmas market trip, I feel like there's just something so much more chaotic about having to lug around all your giant jackets and things like that, and it gets so sweaty, and you also have shorter daylight hours, so just in general, moving around constantly is not the right festive vibe. Plus, if you do things this way, it actually gives you a lot more flexibility down the road, because then you don't need to necessarily plan things in advance in regards to which other Christmas markets you're going to. Day trips, you can tend to plan even up till the day of, whereas if you are going to be changing bases, then you're gonna have to book hotels, and that really locks you into a specific itinerary. So you wanna leave a little bit room for flexibility, just because who knows, you might go to a city, meet a local, and they'll be like, there's this hidden gem Christmas market you need to check out an hour from here. And then you can go. And you don't have to be like, but I've already booked a hotel somewhere else. All right, after booking your flights, it's time to figure out accommodation. In many destinations, Christmas market season is definitely a peak season, so you can definitely expect accommodation to be quite pricey. That's why you should aim to book as early as possible. Overall, from cheapest to most expensive, your accommodation options are hostels, guest houses, hotels, and vacation rentals like Vrbo and Airbnb kind of in between. Usually, I would say to choose the option that suits your budget best. But for Christmas market trips specifically, I do think there's quite a strong case for prioritizing accommodations that have a permanent front desk presence, so places like hotels. And really, that's just because it's super ideal to have a place where you can drop off your luggage either before check-in or after checkout to really maximize your time that you have in these cities. Again, because the daylight hours in winter can be so short, it's really handy to not waste your time waiting for check-in so that you can have a secure place to put your bags. Saying that, a lot of major cities will have lockers or places that you can stow your luggage, even if you're staying in a guest house or Airbnb. One service I personally really like is Bounce, so you can actually go in and leave your bag essentially with different businesses around the city. And usually this isn't too expensive. But overall, for convenience, I think it just makes sense to book a place that'll be able to watch your bags for you. That way it's just one less thing to think about. Plus, I find hotels are especially fun during the Christmas season in Europe. A lot of the time they'll host special festive events, they'll have pretty festive decor, and of course, the pricier the hotel is, the more extravagant the decor is going to be. But I find that staying in hotels during the festive period can really enhance the experience. Especially because with the limited daylight hours, you're probably going to spend a lot more time in the hotel compared to in the summer when you can be out drinking spritzes on a terrace or something. So you do want to find somewhere that's really comfortable, because odds are you're going to be spending quite a bit of time in the hotel, so you want it to be cozy. Now, this is the general process that I follow for finding accommodation. Again, I have a full video on that, but this is what I typically do. Usually I'll hop on aggregators like booking.com to see what the different options are. This is my personal preference. I really like their search tool, so that's the one I usually go to. And then I'll turn on some select filters. I'll usually go for an 8+ rating, as well as places with free cancellation, because you never know. Then I'll sort by lowest price, and then that way I can see the cheapest options that fit my criteria. Then I'll shortlist my favorites, compare the reviews, and then I'll choose one. And if you want to save money and you're not booking hotels in too many different places, then I always recommend booking directly with the hotel actually, because most of the time this is going to give you the best price and again, the best customer service. If, however, you are going to a bunch of different destinations and you like the convenience of having all your bookings in one place, which I usually do, then I'll tend to book through booking.com and keep all my bookings in there. And they do have a great loyalty program as well. So if you book a lot with them, then it kind of does make sense to stick with them because you can get a lot of discounts as well. Now it's time to move on to the next step, which is deciding how you're going to get around. First off, unless you're planning to go to a bunch of tiny remote villages, then I would advise against renting a car. This is because parking can be a huge challenge in European cities, especially when there are big events going on like Christmas markets, which block off a lot of areas. So it'll generally be way less hassle if you just use public transportation instead and go on foot once you're in the city. If you do feel like you need a car for the more remote parts of your itinerary, then I'd recommend just booking a car for the few days that you're going to be traveling rather than for the entire duration of your trip, because you don't want to be worrying about parking when you're in a major city, and odds are, again, you're not really going to use it that much. Now, for longer distances, let's say you're trying to get from one city to another, one tool I really like to use is called Omio. Basically, you just type in point A, point B, and then it'll show you the different options, whether that's trains, buses, or flights. And they allow you to sort based on different things like cheapest, most recommended, shortest trip, and it's totally free. So definitely worth checking out. Now, generally, I would say that trains are the best option for getting between places when you're doing a Christmas market trip, just because it's very comfortable, reliable, and the likelihood of delays from weather is not as high as buses or flights. Plus, depending on the company and the route, long-distance buses can often be delayed, and most of the time, bus stations and bus stops are just out, exposed to the elements, so the last thing you want to do is just wait outside in the cold for your bus to arrive. Trains can be a pricier option though, so again, your best defense is typically to book ahead as far as possible, and I do have a full guide on how to travel Europe by train, so be sure to check that out if you're new to it. Now, I will say another mode of transport that is worth considering is river cruising. So I'm a huge fan of river cruises. I actually worked for a river cruise company for one summer and explored Europe that way, and it's honestly so great. You just unpack once and you get to visit a bunch of destinations, and it's definitely great if you're looking for convenience. Unfortunately, I don't have any personal experience with Christmas market river cruises, so I don't have any companies to recommend, but do make sure you're reading the reviews, and do be mindful of the fact that when you're traveling with a river cruise for Christmas markets, you are of course restricted to a certain itinerary, so it's going to be crowded no matter where you go because you are personally bringing the crowds with you, but I promise it's still going to be magical and still something worth considering. Now next, it's time to make a festive game plan. A lot of haters are going to say that when you see one Christmas market, you've seen them all, but this is something that I personally really disagree with. It's true, a lot of the larger Christmas markets will tend to sell similar goods, but if you put in a little bit of extra work to research different unique Christmas markets, then you can really have a very varied experience, and it's not all going to be samey. Now, if there's one thing I've learned from a decade of Christmas market explorations, it's that in major cities, there are going to be the main Christmas markets that everybody knows about, the main city Christmas market. But at the same time, there are usually plenty more smaller Christmas markets that are geared towards locals and maybe pop-ups that only happen for a few days. But most of the time, these smaller markets are going to be the ones that have very unique gifts made by local artisans. They're going to have a unique twist and overall have a really fun vibe that can contribute a lot to a Christmas market itinerary. So again, make sure you are doing some research to find out where these local markets are. They do vary year to year, but I do promise that extra research will really pay off. Now, in addition to Christmas markets, when I'm creating a festive itinerary, usually I'll also be on the lookout for a few other things. So I'll always be researching nice cozy cafes for hot chocolates and coffees, restaurants that offer nice festive decor, pretty light installations, usually cities will have a lot of these, festive bars or pop-ups, and skating rinks or other fun winter activities. Do note that depending on where you're going, a lot of the more popular festive bars and pop-ups will book out really far in advance. So make sure you are looking into these pretty far in advance and making reservations as needed. Now, generally, here's my process for finding some of these fun activities. And when you do find them, make sure you are starring them on your map. Ideally, on Google Maps, you can make lists that you can attribute a different emoji to. So I'll make different lists like festive decor, I'll put a star emoji, or for coffee shops, I'll put a coffee emoji. That way I'll have a map with all my different spots that I've starred, and I can see at a glance what the different things are as well. So usually here's what I do. First, of course, I hop onto Google and I'll skim through some of the top blogs and listicles to get a sense of what the top attractions and things to do are. And then next I'll hop on social media. Again, I'll just type in keywords like Cologne Christmas and then kind of see what pops up. If you want to be more specific with it, you can also type in festive bar, festive restaurant, and then kind of try to research that way. And I really like this because it's a lot more visual, so that way you can easily tell, okay, is this going to be worth my time? Because a lot of the time, these festive things do come at an extra cost. So you want to make sure they're worth it. Then, very important, a look on local blogs. So most of the time, these local blogs and local websites that cater to people who actually live in the city, this is where you're gonna find some of those pop-ups and fun events. So don't forget, it's not just tourists who are looking for festive things to do. So if you can find a local website that has news or things that are catered towards local people, then you're gonna be able to find lots of cool stuff to do. And again, anything I find that I like, I'll just add on Google Maps with a special emoji so I know where to find it later. And there you have it, the general process. Now, there is also the matter of deciding what to pack, but I do already have a full video all about winter packing and how to pack for Christmas markets, so you can check those out next. And you can also head to my free VIP zone for a free Christmas market packing list as well. And finally, be sure to click this link here for the free workbook that really summarizes everything I've said today. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more travel videos just like this one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.